First time I saw the transfers, I thought it was a mistake. $250. Then another $250. Same account, every payday. Then I clicked on the account number. It wasn't ours. It was in my wife's name. And she'd been putting money into it for months without telling me. I just sat there at the kitchen table, staring at the screen, wondering one thing. What was my wife preparing for? The first time I noticed the transfers, I thought they were a mistake. $250. Then another $250. Then another. I was sitting at the kitchen table with my laptop open, trying to figure out why our checking account was lower than I expected. The money wasn't gone. Not exactly. It was going somewhere. I clicked on the first transfer. Then I saw the account number. It wasn't ours. I sat back in the chair. My wife's name was on the account, but I'd never seen it before. I stared at the screen for a few seconds, then closed the laptop. Karen would be home in about an hour. And for the first time in 32 years, I wasn't sure I knew what was going on in my own house. My name is David. I'm 61. I've been married to Karen for 32 years. We have 2 grown kids, 3 grandchildren, and a house we've spent most of our adult lives paying for. I work maintenance at a manufacturing plant. Karen works part-time at a medical office. We're not rich. We're the kind of people who look at the electric bill before deciding whether to eat out. For most of our marriage, I handled the bills. Not because Karen wasn't capable. She just hated dealing with bank statements, insurance papers, and due dates. I'd make the payments. She'd ask, "Everything covered?" I'd say, "Yeah." And that was usually the end of it. I never thought of it as control. I thought I was helping. About a year before I found that account, we started talking seriously about retirement. I was getting tired of working nights and weekends. One Sunday morning, Karen and I sat at the kitchen table with 2 cups of coffee and my retirement statements. She looked at the numbers for a while. "How much longer do you think you want to work?" "Maybe 3 years. She nodded. "Could we make it on that?" "I think so." She smiled. "Maybe we finally do some traveling." I remember that conversation because I thought we were making plans for our future. Looking back, I think Karen was listening to the same numbers and thinking about something completely different. A few months later, she started asking questions I'd never heard from her before. How much was in my retirement account? What would happen if one of us needed to move out? How much was rent around town? Could we afford to keep the house if one person lived there alone? I thought she was just getting older and thinking more seriously about money. Then one evening, I found a couple of envelopes in the mailbox. They were addressed to Karen from a bank I didn't recognize. She got home before I did that day, and the envelopes were gone by the time I came inside. I didn't think much of it. A few days later, I asked her, "New bank?" She looked up from her phone. "What?" "I saw some mail." "Oh, just something I opened online." "What kind of account?" She paused. "Nothing important." Then she asked me whether I'd remembered to pay the property taxes. That was it. I let it go. Maybe I shouldn't have, but I wasn't looking for trouble in my own house. Then came the transfers. I found them on a Tuesday night. $250 every payday, sometimes $300, always going in the same direction. I opened the transaction details again. The account had been opened in Karen's name. I went back 6 months. The first transfer was almost exactly 3 months after our retirement conversation. I counted them. 14 transfers. A little over $3,000. That wasn't enough to disappear from our lives. But it was enough for a security deposit, enough for a few months of rent, enough to give somebody a way out if they needed one. Karen came home around 6:30. I had the laptop closed. She put her purse on the counter and started taking off her coat. How was work? Fine. She opened the refrigerator. Did you eat? Not yet. She looked at me. You okay? Yeah. I almost asked her about the account. Instead, I said, just tired. She nodded and started making herself a sandwich. We ate in the kitchen like we'd done hundreds of times. She told me about a woman at the medical office who had been complaining about her insurance. I listened. I watched Karen butter a piece of bread. And the whole time, I kept thinking about that account. That night, I barely slept. The next morning, I went through the statements again. I wasn't trying to spy on her. At least, that's what I told myself. I just needed to understand what I was looking at. Then I noticed another charge. A payment from Karen's personal debit card to a property management company. I searched the name. It was an apartment complex about 15 minutes from our house. There was no monthly rent, no lease payment, just a small application fee. I stared at the screen, then I printed the page. I put it in a folder with the bank statements. I didn't confront her, not yet. I went to work. All day I kept thinking about the same question. Was my wife preparing to leave me? I hated even thinking it. That afternoon, I called our son Mike. I didn't tell him what I'd found. I just asked, "You talked to Mom lately?" "Yeah, why?" "Just asking." There was a pause. Then he said, "She did ask me something weird a while back." "What?" "She asked what rent was like around here." My hand tightened around the phone. "Why?" "She didn't say." "Did she seem upset?" "Not really." "Dad, what's going on?" "Nothing. I'll talk to you later." I hung up. That was the moment I stopped telling myself it was just about money. Karen wasn't simply putting a little cash aside. She was making preparations. That evening, I put the folder on the kitchen table. When she came home, I waited until she took off her shoes. Then I said, "Can we talk?" She looked at the folder. Her face changed. Not dramatically, just enough. She knew. I opened it. I found the transfers. She sat down. For a few seconds, she didn't say anything. Then she said, "I was going to tell you." "When?" "I don't know." "What's the account for?" She looked at her hands. I wanted something of my own. I nodded. "Okay." She looked surprised. "Okay?" "Yeah, but why?" She didn't answer. I pointed at the statements. "You've been moving money for months." "I wasn't taking a lot." "I didn't say you were." She looked toward the window. I just wanted to be prepared. That word bothered me. Prepared for what? She stayed quiet. I waited. Finally, she said, "I don't know." I got up and walked to the sink. The refrigerator hummed behind me. 32 years of marriage, and suddenly I was standing 3 feet away from my wife, trying to figure out what she was afraid to tell me. I turned around. "Are you planning to leave?" She shook her head. "I don't know." That answer stayed with me. The next morning, I started gathering our financial records, not to punish her. I just needed to know where I stood. I made an appointment with a financial advisor. Then I spoke with an attorney. He didn't tell me to fight. He didn't tell me to take anything. He told me to slow down. understand the accounts, keep records, don't make decisions when you're angry. So I did. A few days later, Karen and I sat down again. I put the statements on the table. Are you thinking about leaving me? She started crying. I don't know. How long have you been thinking about it? She wiped her face. Several months. I looked at her. Several months? She nodded. There's somebody else? No. I believed her. That almost made it harder. There wasn't another man. There wasn't some secret affair I could blame. There was just my wife, sitting across from me, telling me she wasn't sure she wanted to spend the rest of her life with me, and I'd had no idea. I asked her, why didn't you tell me? She looked down. Because I was scared. Of me? No. Then what? She took a breath. I didn't know what would happen if I said it out loud. I waited. She rubbed her thumb against the edge of the table. You've always handled the money. Because you didn't want to. I know. She looked at me. But if I wanted to leave, I wouldn't even know where to start. I didn't answer. She continued. I didn't want to be stuck somewhere because I couldn't afford to leave. That one hurt. Not because I thought I'd trapped her. I hadn't. But because she had apparently been living with that fear without ever telling me. I thought about all those years of paying bills, making plans, checking retirement numbers. I'd thought I was taking care of things. She'd started to see the same thing differently. I didn't like that, but I couldn't pretend I hadn't heard it. That night, I slept in the spare bedroom. The next morning, I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table by myself. I looked at the retirement statement. Then I looked at the folder with Karen's transfers. For the first time, I understood that we'd been planning two different futures without realizing it. I could have emptied the account. I could have called the kids and told them everything. I could have made sure Karen knew exactly how angry I was. I didn't. Instead, I told her, if you don't know whether you want to stay married, I'm not going to force you. She looked at me. But I'm not going to keep living like we're married while you quietly prepare to leave. She nodded. If we're going to work on this, we do it honestly. No more secret accounts. No more hiding things. She looked down. And if I can't, I was quiet for a while. Then we start separating our lives. She didn't answer that day. We tried talking for another week. Not romantic conversations, not dramatic ones. Just the kind where two people sit at a kitchen table and finally say things they should have said years earlier. Karen told me she had been unhappy for a long time. I admitted I'd gotten too comfortable. I'd assumed 32 years meant the next 10 would look like the last 10. I had been wrong about that. A week later, she told me she wanted to separate. It hurt. I won't pretend it didn't. But at least the guessing was over. The next few months were mostly paperwork and difficult conversations. We divided the finances. We figured out the house. We told the kids. Mike was angry. Lisa cried on the phone. Neither of them wanted to take sides. I told them, you don't have to. Karen moved into an apartment, and suddenly, the money she'd been saving became real. Rent, utilities, insurance, legal bills, groceries. There was no secret second life waiting for her, just a smaller apartment, a new budget, and a lot of uncertainty. She wasn't building some perfect new life. She was starting over. So was I. There were nights when I sat in the house and listened to the furnace running. I'd spent 32 years hearing another person move around in the kitchen. Now it was quiet. But slowly, things changed. I started fixing things I'd ignored. I cleaned out the garage. I went through boxes we'd moved 3 times without opening. I changed the way I handled my retirement money. And I stopped making financial plans based on 2 people. I still talked to Karen when we needed to. We weren't friends, not yet. Maybe we never would be. But we could talk without trying to hurt each other. One Saturday morning, I was sitting on the porch with a cup of coffee when my phone buzzed. It was Mike. "Breakfast?" I smiled. I looked at the paperwork beside me. My retirement account was smaller than I'd hoped. My house was quieter than it used to be. The future wasn't what Karen and I had planned, but at least I knew what it was now. I finished my coffee. I picked up my keys and I walked toward the truck. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't waiting to see what somebody else was going to decide about my life. I already knew